Very much. Yeah, welcome to this little presentation. We're talking about optics, electro-optical devices in particular. Optics for hunters are something that is not just nice to have. This is a question about an issue. We need these, right? You're talking about necessity. We need to be able to rely on those products because otherwise we'll be unable to make an ethical shot. Now, some people might say, what about the times where we just had iron sights? Yes, that works, but it limits our range and it increases the risk for ill shot placement. So here, the innovation improves the sustainability and ethics. The question is, however, how do we use it, right? So it's all about the user and the human being. So, even though we started with iron sights, and we then came to telescopes and binos and rifle scopes, and we came to red dots, we're now with the electro-optical devices, which means we have the ability to see what we could not see before, the unseen, when it's dark. Of course, we have also devices that provide 4K vision during daylight, but what I want to concentrate on now is more what happens from dusk to dawn. The thing is, the better the sight, the better the identification, and given that the person operating these sites knows what they're doing, the better the decision and the better the outcomes. That means we shoot what we want to shoot because we are not only hunting in terms of like gathering food, which is the main purpose, but we also have this mission to take care of a healthy environment, biodiversity, nature protection. That means we have to select. In order to select which animal we're shooting, we need to be able to have a very clear identification. We are today talking only about electro-optical devices. We are not talking about traditional optics. That would fill a whole day in itself with all the different use cases. But we are talking about those devices that become more and more common in typical hunting situations. We also exclude particular long-range shooting, which is an issue that becomes more popular not only among sport shooters, but also among hunters. But this is not our main topic today. And we certainly exclude military and police applications due to two reasons. A, we heard IWA and not Inforstec, number one. B, what we shoot at usually doesn't shoot back. And the technology that's used in that field is something that's not even allowed in the civil market. And so it's no meaning in presenting it here. Okay, electro-optical devices for hunters. We're going to go through everything. It starts with the user. That is very, very important. And those of you who listened to what was discussed here before, that popped up too. Yeah, we have technology, but if the human being is the one making the decision, it's not really the technology that's the cause of the problem. It's typically the person pulling the trigger. We also talk about what does this mean in general. If we start with the user, because that has implications which are pretty important for manufacturers. We also talk about what really matters. And the thing here is, we all want to be an asset. We don't want to be a liability. And in order to be an asset instead of a liability, we need to know our stuff. We need to know what we are doing. Just having access to a ballistic calculator doesn't make us a long-range shooter. Just having access to a device with artificial intelligence doesn't mean we let the device determine whether that is an animal we are allowed to shoot or not. That is our decision. Whether we have a high-end rifle with a super modern, super fast caliber, it doesn't mean that we don't have to care for wind, for distance, and whatnot, okay? So the responsibility is still with us as hunters. Also, we're going to break that down to product level to make it more concrete, just in case that interests you. And we're going to draw some conclusions, and you're always welcome to come up with some questions then if you want to. I would be very happy to answer those. So let's start. What does it mean? Everything starts with the user. So if I say something critical, like Most users are very stupid. I talk from experience, okay? I'm not blaming anyone. I'm talking about myself. So why is that the case? Why are most users stupid? Because they act in an environment which is coined by uncertainty, and we are under some kind of stress. It might be positive stress, but we're excited. There's something we want to shoot, right? So we might not be as logically operating as we would normally do, okay? So from a product side, no matter how proud you are of your engineering, in order to make a product for a user operating in the field, not on a shooting range, you want to focus on understanding the problem before you develop a solution. We have too many products out there developed by brilliant engineers coming up with a brilliant solution, but unfortunately, there's no problem for that solution. That's kind of tricky, you know? If you focus on the practice, the focus point should be usability, and the usability is not determined by an engineer, neither by the marketing department, and certainly not by the CEO of a company. The usability is determined by the ability of the user, right? And how they act. The next thing is reliability. If we go out there as hunters, we invest time, we invest money. In some cases, we go out there hiking for days. We are off the grid, we are far away. We have that one chance to shoot that deer, buck, whatever, boar, I don't know what. We get our gear up and it fails. That is annoying. That is, for the manufacturing side, the one way to go if you want to destroy your brand. If it doesn't work in practice, it's not worth a dime. So reliability is super important. And let me stress that under adverse conditions. That means frost, rain, fog, mud, okay? So we're talking adverse conditions. Okay, so how can we decide what is important? We need to figure out what are real needs or what is wishful thinking. Personally, as a user, I feel that there's too much wishful thinking glossed up by the marketing department when products are presented. You buy those products, you're out in the field, and you see that there is no match between what you saw in the video on Instagram and what's happening in the real world. That is not good. We also need to make a decision. Do we want to have a product that is versatile, that does everything okay? Or should it do something very particular in the best way? Is it broad abilities versus specialized abilities? Very important. The market is full of these one-size-fits-all devices. It is not that full of those particular devices for particular needs. Maybe that's an idea to think about. If we're talking electro-optical devices, we're always talking battery. That battery runtime better be good. If I say good, I'm saying preferably 6-7 hours or more permanent operation, because I don't want to carry too many spare batteries with me. I have to carry some if I'm using electro-optical devices. But I don't want to have like a whole rucksack full of batteries, right? Also, preferably, if I have several devices, can they please have the same battery? Yeah, that will be very helpful. So that's something to think about. Then we also have to think in two ways, and that is something that's pretty particular to Germany. I don't know many other countries where we have that challenge. If we're talking electro-optical devices and hunting, we very often talk about thermal devices, right? So the Germans are allowed to use clip-on devices. If that is the case, we need to have traditional optics as a backs for that electro-optical device. Is that rugged enough? Is the connection between the two good enough? Rugged enough? Is it usable? Very important question. Other countries don't have that challenge. because they are allowed to use thermal scopes, light vision scopes. So now these days, everybody in Germany says, oh, when can we use that? And there's rumors going on and they'll be legalized. People come to me and they're all sad that they cannot use these scopes. I often say, like, look, I mean, sure, I also would like to have one because it's a fancy toy to play with. But think about why professional users in other fields who have to use guns don't use those scopes. They use clip-ons. There's a reason for that. But still, if you do a product, if you make a product, you want to be crystal clear about the purpose. You want to have a very clear understanding about the problem that you're trying to solve. If you can solve that problem, you have a market. And your customer is going to be loyal with you like forever if it's rugged and reliable. So, we need to rethink several aspects of what we used to think about hunting, both when it comes to gear, but also our own practice. So, critically, do we really understand what a user means if he says something? Most likely not. It's a big thing in every company. Communication is key. Most often it fails. Is whatever we do, is it fail safe? We cannot guarantee that. That is why iron sights are still popular with professional users as backup sights. And every serious hunter will not want to have no iron sights on their rifle, just for that case. I mean, if you're the kind of hunter going out like 2 hours for the evening, it's not that bad. If you go out for a weekend hunt and you hike and you can't change back, you want to have iron sights. Okay, so next question that's relating to the topic here before. Who decides to pull the trigger? We have that example here. I don't know if you guys heard it or understood it because it wasn't German, but there was some case where you could like basically do your shooting through the computer by clicking the mouse. That could also be done by a robot, possibly steered by AI, who then had to identify what am I shooting at. That is freaking me out. I don't want that. If there's a weapon involved, somebody's pulling the trigger, I want a human being to decide, and not some weird AI that already now in simple context has many glitches. So we have to be critical before we integrate any of that in any hunting related gear. We want to make sure it is rock solid and doesn't fail. So what really matters? Affordability, especially here, German context. I am German, I know German hunters a lot, so the first question is always, what does it cost? Yes, affordability is important, but it is by far not everything. Safety is important, right? Performance is important, reliability is important, ruggedness is important. Taking on responsibility. Yes, you can make things affordable, but the minute you start making them cheap, you're cheating on the hunter. And the hunters who buy cheap are cheating themselves, and they do it at the expense of the creatures they're shooting at. So there's a limit of how cheap you can go. If you compromise at the wrong end of the scale, that can be deadly, also for you. So, if we're talking about electro-optics, we must be aware that what happens is a signal enters the front of the optic, is processed through the optic, comes out at the end of the optic where we look at it on a screen. That takes time. The time difference between entering and exiting the optic is the latency. The company I have the pleasure to work together with has products with enormously little latency. We tried our electro-optics on the running boar on the range, and it was no problem. We've tried other products, and they're miserably failed. So, that is no joke. We need to know what we're doing in order to, set our effort at the right place. Then, never forget that usability does not equal the ability of the average Joe and Jay. Again, not everybody of us practices every day, several hours a day. Okay? We always want to design for stupid, not for genius. One thing that would be very interesting and really a big innovation, if anyone would find a way to have a real optical magnification in an electro-optic. We had solutions where there was a wiggle between different lenses, but that really didn't work. So if there's anyone from manufacturing side here, that would be cool. Can have that. Okay, let's go on. The punchline in this whole thing is, whenever we use these, we should have the claim towards ourselves that we do not try on living creatures. If we shoot on a paper target and punch a hole in that, it doesn't matter if it works or not. If we shoot on a living creature, we should have the decency to know what we're doing. Reliably proven in the field should be the yardstick and not approved by the revenue officer in the first place. Of course, you have to get the two in line, right? I mean, that's how business works. But that reliably proven in the field is exactly what matters also with the outcome with regard to, is it a product that customers will buy in the long run? Will it create trust in the brands? So the next thing is, because we're talking about hunting, which is not in a staged environment, again, even though if I repeat myself, ruggedness. Whatever you do, it needs to survive use in the field. In the civilian market, that surprisingly seems to be an issue. In the less civilian market, that is the main criteria, right? Some people call that nil-spec. Let's break that down to product level by use case. And I want to start with myself, the average Joe and Jay. So, even though the experience is a little longer. Experience as a hunter, 2 to 5 years. Average shooting distance below 100 meters. Typical hunting, 10 to 20 days per year, mostly high seed or blind, so no moving. Maybe occasional stalking, mostly dependent on hunting invitations, so no own area, so that means not regular practice. And typical conditions in which they hunt are dependent on geography. In Germany, when we're talking electro-optical devices, what you always have to consider, we normally have a high level of humidity in the air. That is a challenge to electro-optics. Typical game is wild boar, occasionally small predators, foxes, raccoons, and raccoon dogs. Why then a roe deer? Well, because we're not allowed to hunt those with electro-optical devices. That's the simple explanation. Next case, the stalker, always moving. Typically more years of experience because stalking is no joke. You need to know what you're doing, otherwise you're screwing up badly. Average shooting distance still below 100 meters because you're moving and you're typically shooting from a stick. It's not that you couldn't shoot further, it's just a matter of backstop, right? Because you don't want the bullet to hit the person in the next village. Also very important and takes a lot of stress out of the hunting. So typically hunting for more than 20 days per year, otherwise you cannot get that experience. Mostly stalking, occasional high seed and blind, often active in crop protection, which is a special case for hunting, right? That's not about romantics and the fireplace and celebrating what you did. This is about keeping economic damage away from the farmers. That's serious. Typical conditions, spring and summer, dependent on geography, again, lots of humidity. You gotta know your environment to know what's important, what you consider. Typical game, wild boar, occasionally small predators, same as the last one. Next case, the long ranger, something we almost don't have in Germany, but which we have in other countries like the States, where we're talking coyote hunting, 500 yards out. So pretty, special. Experience as a hunter, 5+ years, average shooting distance certainly over 150 meters, often way further. Typically hunting experience 30 days per year, stalking, high seed, blind, whatever it takes to get out there. Often active in crop protection and livestock protection. Typically conditions, again, depending on geography, you see the lower part, repeats itself. I don't want to go through this all the time. Then we have a trade hunter, also something comparably rare in the European environment, maybe not in Sweden or other Scandinavian countries. These people need a lot of experience, and by the way, they need also physical fitness, right? Because they're moving out there, carrying all this shit, and that takes a little bit. So these people would always try to shoot below 250 meters, so to get closer, but they would regularly have to shoot out to 250 meters because sometimes you can't get closer. So typically hunt a lot of days during the year. The specialty here is if you do that, you want to pack light, right? Normally, you don't have a caddy who's carrying all your crap. Usually, you don't have a 4x, what's they called again, side by side or 4x4 that where you can carry it with. Very often, you're stalking, you're walking, right? So if you have a 20-kilogram rucksack and don't forget your food, so you want to pack light. You also want to pack light with your gear. So you don't want to have extra shit with you. You don't want to have like a night vision here, a bino, regular day optics there, then a thermal. Oh, hell, how can I save weight? It's important. Think about these solutions if you're a manufacturer. Typical game, something that we, as I said, don't regularly have in the most parts of Germany, but we do have it in Scandinavia, in the States, elk, moose, that kind of thing. Here you get one more time. I try that again. Here you got the overview. Different types, different needs overview. If you do a product, you should go and have an idea about who's my client. What are they doing? What am I specializing on? So if you have the average Joe and Jane, those people are served. The market is full of that. The jack of all trades, the average thing that does everything just fine enough. If you have the stalker, lightweight is important. If you have the trail hunter, lightweight is important. And battery life, especially, they can't go back to the socket and charge up, right? If you have the long ranger, it's all about precision. Out there, you need to identify what you're shooting at, right? Always remember the 4 basic firearms rules. Never point your muzzle at something that you don't want to shoot. Rule number 2. So what do these people carry with them? Average Joe and Jane, probably bino, a rifle scope, maybe an LRF. Electro-optical, well, maybe a night vision clip-on, depending on local laws, and something to observe. What are they missing? Well, they're missing optical magnification, as everybody does, right? Because that gives the clearest picture, the base magnification in electro-optical devices. The stalker will certainly have small binos for daytime because they give a better image. They have low to medium magnification scope, preferably with an LRF, or they're really good and they can use their mil reticles to estimate distance. They'll probably have a monocular for thermal or night vision, maybe a dual use night vision, LRF and low mag or light night vision scope. And important for them, because their targets might be moving, is zero latency. They can't afford latency. They might shoot a moving targets. The kicker would be goggles, right? So that you could stalk during the night without falling over with all your stuff on the back. The long ranger needs a spotting scope to reach out there and do the identification. Probably has a high magnification scope with a first focal length reticle to have a backup in case the LRF fails. They'll probably have a monocular thermal, for example, to support and be able to see in the dark, also at maximum reach. They'll have probably a dual use night vision, LRF and low mag light night vision scope as a backup. Important for them, zero latency because of the long distance, right? Takes some time for the bullet to get there. Preferably optical magnification. The trail hunter, for these people, lightweight, ruggedness is key. They won't go out there if the devices don't fulfill that task. They might have small traditional optics, medium to high magnification binos, preferably with an LRF and some kind of scope with the first focal plane reticle as a backup again. They might add a little clip-on, that's what I mean with a dual-use device, right? That they can observe with, but also use on the weapon. And certainly they could make a lot of use out of goggles you could walk with because they're, always strolling the ground. They also need zero latency. They're shooting in an environment where you want to make sure your one shot hits, and they would benefit from variable optical magnification. And that is about it. I think it helps to have an idea about the user that you designed the product for. And sometimes all this rush and all the competition leads to a kind of Me Too thing where everybody follows the other one without rethinking the actual purpose of what they're doing. And by the way, that's not only for the manufacturers, that's also the thing for the people actually going out there. Because we are herd animals, we're social beings, right? That traps us sometimes. Let's stop for a little while and think what we could do better and what we actually need. It leads to better decisions, both in manufacturing and buying. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? So you're all happy? That's cool. No questions? Was that good? Yeah, really? Okay, thank you.
And then very much also from my side. Und in der Notfolge